Today, tool review number 2. I'm going to talk about a super cool tool. This is the Kurt J. Lesker PVD 75. It's used in lots of universities. It's a workhorse in our clean room. PVD stands for physical vapor deposition, so this is a sputterer. It is, like I said, a workhorse in our clean room, and it's used widely by a lot of universities, maybe some small companies. It has a lot of flexibility, but it's got some downsides too that we'll explore. Generally love this tool. Like I said, this tool is one of the most used ones in the clean room. So what does the tool do? Like I said, it does sputtering. What is sputtering? Sputtering is where you have a metal target like this. This is titanium, okay? And you bombard it with argon ions. The argon ions strike the target, knocking off metal neutrals. The neutrals then end up splattering all over the place, and some end up on your substrate. Usually it's a silicon wafer in our case, but we do all sorts of other things. You can check out Thought Emporium. He coats playing cards and flowers. And, we have another sputtering machine that we can do all kinds of crazy stuff in for our SEM. But this is our fancy one. So we don't put bugs in this one, so that we keep our semiconductor stuff clean. Bugs, usually dead, always dead. Anyway, so the argon ions bombard the substrate, metal neutrals come off, end up on your substrate, I said. So you're looking at kind of a low pressure. Usually use argon. You can use other gases to make reactive deposition, say. So maybe you want to make metal oxide. So you start with some argon, you throw some oxygen in there. Or maybe you want to make a nitride. You might put some ammonia or nitrogen. Probably not nitrogen though. Some people do for nitrides. What else? So you got a low pressure. 760 torr to an atmosphere. We use torr, it's just a habit. Same thing as millimeters of mercury. So you're looking to strike a plasma. We go from about 5 millitorr on the low side up to tens of millitorr typically. Rarely will you go above 50 millitorr. The lower the pressure of the background gas, the more kinetic energy your ions have, although there are a few of them, and also the more kinetic energy your neutrals have upon arriving to the substrate. Why does that matter? Because the more kinetic energy your neutrals have, the more perfect film you make. That is, sputtering and evaporation both produce a lot of defects. Even on pro level tools like this, you end up with voids, dislocations. You never make really crystalline materials using this process. So a lot of times you want to be on the low side of the pressure range to try and make your films as perfect as possible. They will never be perfect. They will follow, defects will follow stacking faults. Sorry for the jargon, but just shorthand for your films are never perfect and they often have pinholes. So I haven't put out a video yet, but we did one where we were trying to use a chrome layer to mask oxide, silicon dioxide or glass from etching in HF. It didn't work well because there are always pinholes using this technique. If you want a perfect film, probably you're going to need to do atomic layer deposition. At any rate, back to the tool. So this tool has a lot of bells and whistles. We have 2 DC power supplies. So that will go up to about 300 watts. We have 2 RF power supplies that will go up to, I think, 1500 watts. It says so right behind me, 1500 watts. We also have an ion gun. So what you can do is you can, while you're sputtering and your neutral metal is arriving at your substrate, you can bombard your substrate with argon ions, that reduces the deposition rate, but it gives the stuff a lot, ending up on the surface, a little boost in kinetic energy. That lets them kind of bounce around on the substrate until they find a spot, a hole where they can fill in. And so you make a little bit higher quality films. This apparently is done widely for optical films to improve their density and hence their optical properties. So we use DC for metals, we use RF for dielectrics, use the ion gun to improve your film density. We also have a pulse DC option on this, which is supposed to prevent arcing on your dielectric films. I don't know that we've ever used it. We don't do a lot of dielectric films because usually those are metal oxides. The stoichiometry gets messed up. You lose oxygens. You don't recover it. It's kind of you really got to tweak the process. One popular film that's done is indium tin oxide. So that's widely done for all your displays. TFTs, thin film transistors. So it's a conductive film that is transparent. And that's tricky to make. You really got to tune it, and then you got to anneal it to get your conductivity up. If you ever buy conductive transparent slides, they can be quite expensive. It's because the process is tricky. So at any rate, so that's one case where that's used. Now on this tool, like I said, we got 2 DCs, we got 2 RFs. We also have down here, let me zoom in a little bit. I really don't want to do a lot of takes on this. So down here, we have the ion source power supply. We also have this power supply 6, which is a substrate bias power supply. So what you can do is you can put your substrate in, then put in some oxygen, and this power supply actually powers the substrate. So you can create an oxygen plasma to clean off your substrate. There's a little electrode behind it. Pretty fancy. Fancy. Anyway, so you might be able to see, maybe I should GoPro this. Wait a second, let me go ahead and GoPro this. Okay, so this is our typical control panel view. So we have 3 substrates. These are the shutter controls, or 3 source shutters, 3 sputter heads basically, okay? And then a substrate, each of the shutter controls. There's a place you could write down data about your targets. The substrate can be heated, very nice feature sometimes. Here's all our power supplies where we control them. I'm not going to get into details. The control is set up to sort of form a matrix, so I can take power supply 1 and I can send it to source 1 or 3. Similarly, I could take source 3 here and send it to any one of these, etc. Similarly with the RF, so you can just create a matrix. You can do co-depositions where you are depositing an alloy all at once. That is a problem with sputtering in general. If you have an alloy, not all materials are going to come off evenly at the same time. So sometimes if you want to create an alloy, you sputter more than one material at once. Okay, so I guess what I'll do is I'll show an example. I have a chrome gold deposition I'm doing now. I'll just show a quick example. I've shown this on social media a lot. Just show an example, and then we'll get into the details of some of the subtleties of this tool. Okay, so my substrate's been in there. It's a laminated piece of polyimide on a piece of glass. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to show you a deposition real quick. This is not a training video. So what you can see our base pressure right here, 1.5 times 10 to the minus 7. It's got a big cryo pump in the back, which I'll show in a little bit. So what I'm going to do, go to Platen Motion, I'm going to start it moving. The platen is spinning. Now I'm going to introduce gas. I'm going to do source 3 first. That's my chrome. That's my adhesion layer. So what I'm going to do is go to gas. I'm going to introduce that gas. Oh, well, before I do the gas, I have to close the gate valve. So that brings most of the gate valve closed. So we can GoPro that. So that's the gate valve mostly closed. And you can see the pressure has come up to 1 times 10 to the minus 5. Now I'm going to go ahead and introduce gas. I'm going to use control mode 4, which slaves the mass flow controller to my pressure set point. We've pretty much settled on 5 millitorr for 90% of our depositions. Now I'm going to go to the deposition tab. Just real quick, here's the vacuum tab. Just shows what's going on with your vacuum chamber and your roughing pump and your cryo pump. You can see one of the things we have always goes wrong with cryos is that the thermocouple seems to lose signal. So, so at any rate, yeah, that's a problem with all cryos. It's not a Lesker thing. Okay, so go to the deposition tab. I'm going to be using, first I'm going to go ahead and open the substrate shutter. It takes a while for the substrate shutter to open. That pressure needs to be adjusted. It's a pneumatic shutter. So I'm going to go ahead and pre-sputter source 3. Okay, we also stick with 300 watts pretty much for most of our depositions. So there we go. And we're off. You can see the current and voltage and power during the deposition. We're set at 300 watts. Okay, there went my substrate shutter. So now I can do the deposition of chrome. With chrome in all refractory materials, that's my phone going off. With chrome in all refractory materials, you want to knock off the native oxide that accumulates on there. So you're going to do what we call a pre-sputter, let it run for a couple minutes before you open the shutter. And I need to check my times on this. They're going to be 2.5 minutes and 3.5 minutes. So, going to open this shutter and start my timer. I'm going to turn the lights off so we can see this run. All right, here's our chamber, and there is the sputter target. You may be able to see the substrate spinning up there. There we go. That's the chrome, 5 millitorr, 300 watts. I post on TikTok and Instagram about this plasmas all the time. So gold deposition. We are going to do, let me set the timer first, 3.5 minutes of gold. Okay. So now let's, something I almost always forget to do is reroute the gas to source 1 before doing the deposition. I'm going to check deposition. Make sure my pressure is reasonable, right around the 5 millitorr mark. Okay, so now I'm going to reroute the DC power supply 3, source 1, turn it on. We got power and current. You can see there it is without the shutter, or with the substrate shutter on. I will try to capture this. There it is opening. Beautiful purpley pink. And start the timer. There it is. Beautiful. Beautiful. It's a very short deposition onto polyimide. There's our parameters. Okay. Okay, just real quick, I want to show you this. So this little refrigerator looking thing has a secret. all the electronics are right here. Pretty neat. So that's the DC power supply running at the top. I'm trying to get this on the GoPro. These are our tuner and RF power supplies. More power supplies. This is the filament controller for the ion beam. And this is the pulse DC thingy, which I don't think we've ever used. Okay, gotta turn that off. Gold is done. Power off. Everybody off. Gas off. Now, just gonna vent it. PC vent. And we're good to go. Pretty easy, pretty reasonable to use. Please forgive my shoddy camera work. Okay, almost at atmosphere. $800, that should be it. There we go. There it is. So, just to show you, so now I'm going to take my targets and substrates out. Yes, it's done running a recipe, I know. Substrate shutters open. That's my chrome. And here's my gold. And substrate is up there with the shutter that is a little sticky. Come on, shutter, you can do it. Just give him a little push. Now this is hot. So is that. They get hot during the deposition. They are cooled through these lines. Early sputterers required that you use high resistivity water. That is no longer a requirement. They must have some sort of dielectric barrier between the sputter head and the cooling water. That way you don't end up with Teflon lines in your vacuum chamber, which, although more inert than other polymers, would still tend to contaminate your depositions. So anyway, there you go. There's a substrate up there. Here's how we take the substrate out, like that. And I can't do this with one hand, so I'm going to have to put this down. I'll show the result in just a second. Okay, so let's see, lift this guy out. So there we go. There's my substrate. Another poorly laminated polyimide film on glass for a customer. It's not pretty, but I think it'll get the job done. We use polyimide, super inert, high temperature polymer, doesn't outgas like others, so there you go. Here's a quick view on the GoPro, nice and pretty. That just comes out of there. So it will take up to a 6-inch wafer, and that goes back in. And then we take the target out. Okay, so now you've seen what the tool does. How well does it do it? Well, because of the rotation and the off-center positioning of the sputter heads, we can get a 5% uniformity. We can get decent deposition rates, a few hundred nanometers, maybe 100 nanometers a minute, depending on the metal and the conditions. Other things, okay, like the software. Software's good. We give them a thumbs up for that. Sometimes sputtering tools are characterized by their minimum pressure. We can strike a plasma probably about 4 millitorr, which is pretty good. We have an older tool sitting right next to this one that we'd be lucky to get 10 millitorr. So we definitely like that. Just kind of glancing at my notes here. Okay, so it does it well. One of the big complaints I would say that we have on the downside is it only does one wafer at a time. Sometimes, like when we're running class wafers, we want to do a bunch of wafers, 6 at a time. But this really is a research tool. It wasn't really made for that. So you can't really fault them for that. In terms of sort of technical glitches, this tool has been solid, except flow switches. There are sensors in there to make sure that there's coolant running through here. Those flow switches regularly fail. About once a year they fail. We recently realized that our cooling loop, so we're using the building cooling loop to cool this tool and its components, and we had a particle filter in there, but it was not engaged. So it might have something to do, the failure of our flow sensors might have something to do with that. Okay, maintenance. This guy is pretty easy on maintenance. Whenever the power fails, you have to regenerate the cryo, which is a day-long thing. Every year or so, we pull out the chamber, parts of the chamber and sputter heads. There's a chamber liner. We bead blast them, try to bring the thing back to life. Of course, you have to keep an eye on your backing pump oil. That's just a regular, any vacuum chamber requires that sort of maintenance. So that's really the only thing I have to say about maintenance and potential issues. Customer support, good. We really like Kurt J. Lesker for all their tools. I like the company. You know, if you guys want to send us some free tools to talk about, we'd be happy to take them. Cost. We bought this in 2010. The cost was 229 kilobucks, which is on par. It seems like a pretty decent price for everything this tool does. So, you know, this is like a fancy, pretty nice house in Louisville. You know, this one refrigerator-sized tool strikes me as more reasonable than what we paid for the Tryon in Tool Review 1, given all this tool does. Would we buy it again? For a research cleaner? Absolutely. Absolutely. We really like this tool. Okay, I guess that's it. Hopefully I can get this posted soon. See you all next time. Peace.